Ready to go? Okay. Hang on a second here. Okay. Thanks for your patience. Let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you so much for today. Pray that you'll bless our time together, and that we'll be able to glean some information from the events of this week and how they relate to Bible prophecy. Pray that you'll help us to always remember that our hope is in you and in your return. And pray all of us always to keep that in mind. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I titled this Slammed, and that was only because I was feeling slammed and trying to come up with a title. And nobody suggested anything this morning like they do some weeks on the way in. It's, as you know, it was last week, I think I titled it, it was a lot happened in the year that happened in the past week or something like that. It references that there's a lot of things going on. And we do talk about that: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. As we see these things come together, and I think we can all agree, it was another crazy week. A lot of theory. I should have called it theoretical. A theoretical week, or a week in theoretical thinking, or something like that, because everybody's got a theory about everything. Have you noticed that? It's kind of crazy as we go through this. And again, I'll reference this passage in Daniel, that as we get closer to the end and we have a picture of these things, eventually we'll have a better understanding. I don't think we have a better understanding right now. And there were a lot, to me, it seems like everybody else is far more certain about what's going on and who caused this and who caused that and who did what than I am, because and maybe it's because I'm a trial lawyer, and as I would put a case together, I would have to piece things together. And so all I have right now are a lot of questions that I want to ask. I don't think we're at the stage where we can make firm conclusions on much of anything. But Daniel talks about the fact that we will be at a time where there will be more understanding, and the people who understand will be wise and instruct the many. I don't think that's going to be everybody, and I don't think that the people who will be wise and instruct the many will necessarily be the ones who are conveying something. Well, I think Daniel, if it looked in the world today, you would say, and the wise will be able to generate clickbait on the internet, and I think that's what a lot of what is going on. So we'll cover as much as we can today, and I have a boatload, and now I've got to get all the way down to where my slides actually are. I didn't even have time to clear out the stuff that I did last week. Hang on a second here. Let me just do that. Okay, so let's start. First thing I want to start with, we'll talk a little bit about U.S. politics. Now, the U.S. still appears to be the most powerful nation in the world, biggest economy, and that's changing. But understand that, rivals to that, Russia asserts military power, and Russia's, asserting that they're going to make new missiles that were under an agreement that Trump abrogated or withdrew from a few years back. And so now there's this threat of global nuclear war that's looming on the horizon. And, I have friends who are convinced that it's going to happen. Some say next week, some say in the fall. And so we'll just have to see. But you should be prepared. I mean, I do think that there is a very real threat of global war. But the United States does lead the world in a lot of categories and is very influential. And I think we're really messing around in the Middle East with a lot of dangerous things. And I do subscribe to my friend Bill Koenig's view that when we mess with Israel, things happen to us. And Bill's written a number of books documenting that quite a bit. So last week, we were talking a little bit about this Trump assassination attempt. I'm going to play for you a video clip that I thought somebody did that was pretty good to show the danger that Trump was in.
Take a look what happened.
Let me shut that down. So you can see that it came very close. You see the way he had his head turned and then what happened when he got shot in his ear. So it was a very close call. So now what happens is everybody takes that and they build the narrative that they want to build. So there are people who think that Trump is the answer to everything. We have to admit, there are people that turn him into almost a messianic type figure, that he's going to lead the world to peace and that type of thing. As I observed Donald Trump this week, I think I saw a man who had changed. Because I don't think something like this happens to you and it doesn't change you, a near-death experience. And so there was the Republican convention. He got the nomination. He named J.D. Vance as his vice presidential running mate. And it's interesting, and when that happens, it's like, I don't even remember if that happened before the shooting or after. Did it happen before the shooting that he named J.D. Vance? It was after? Okay. So, and then of course, everybody's got a theory. And so I could spend an hour going through all the different theories about what happened. I think the takeaway from it is that the world we live in, and the world we're going to live in until the Lord returns, is going to be very volatile. And you're going to be getting slammed from all different quarters with all kinds of information and all kinds of theories, and everybody's going to be certain that they're right. So for example, I heard one attorney, and his theory was that Pompeo was acting like he was going to be the vice president. As he arrived in Milwaukee, this was before the shooting. And then the shooting took place and Trump named J.D. Vance, which indicates that Pompeo thought he was going to get the vice presidential nomination. So he must have been in on the assassination attempt. And then I listened to the guy a little bit more, and then everybody else in Washington was in on the assassination attempt on both sides of the aisle and the deep state. And I guess my point is you can't have it the narrative they built is everybody was responsible. And then we saw, for example, here's a little
Take a look what happened.
Video.
It's the Secret Service's biggest crisis in decades. How did a 20-year-old gunman climb a rooftop with a rifle and fire shots at former President Donald Trump from less than 150 yards away?
Shooters down. Are we good to move?
This is a colossal failure for the Secret Service.
The Secret Service isn't just responsible for the safety and security of the protectee. They're also there for the safety and the security of the people that are showing up to these events. So this is tragic all around.
Here's what we know about the security gaps that led to the assassination attempt on Trump.
Yeah, look, there he is.
In a video taken by a bystander shortly before the shooting, the gunman, Thomas Matthew Crooks, could be seen crawling on a roof as people were heard pointing him out.
There shouldn't be here. Dangerous people. Criminals. We have criminals. We have...
And a witness told the BBC,
The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle.
but those alerts, if heard by any officers, didn't seem to make it up the chain back to the command center.
That's a massive communication failure. When I was overseeing sites, we would have Secret Service agents right next to police with police radios. If there's something that's going on, boom, everybody knows instantly. Quite frankly, if the detail had known there was an armed person climbing up on a roof, they would have evacuated the president right away, no questions asked.
Beyond that, the Secret Service said it relied on local law enforcement to secure the building that crooks climbed. Typically, Secret Service and local police operate together in concentric circles. Closest to the principal, in this case Trump, are teams of highly trained Secret Service agents. In the middle perimeter, there's usually a mix of Secret Service and local law enforcement who might cover portions of the motorcade and any pre-event screening. And in the outer perimeter, security largely falls on local law enforcement. In Butler, the building the shooter climbed was technically outside of the rally venue, and the Secret Service didn't sweep it.
It fell through the cracks, which still falls to the Secret Service because it means nobody checked to make sure the plan was in fact implemented correctly.
According to the Butler County Sheriff, right before the shooting, a local officer climbed onto the building and saw Crooks, but dropped to the ground when Crooks aimed his rifle at him. In an interview with ABC News, the Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle said local officials were inside the building when Crooks scaled it, but said,
"The buck stops with me. I am the director of the Secret Service."
There are also questions about why counter-sniper teams located behind Trump didn't take out the shooter earlier, even though they appeared to be facing in his direction.
Once the shooting started, they had rounds on target almost instantly. So that tells me that that shooter had come to their attention, and they were in the decision loop.
Okay, I mean, I'm sure you've heard a lot of these analyses. So let me just make a couple comments about them, because right now I don't think we know. I was 9 years old when JFK got assassinated. And I remember a little bit about what happened, and there were Secret Service failures that day. I think that's clear, and there's a lot of theories. As you know, there's books and books and books and books have been written about all the different theories about what happened to JFK and who was responsible and who did it, and, you know, everywhere from it was LBJ to it was the mafia to it was Lee Harvey Oswald. But I remember a couple things about that because I was 9, but this was like the first big national, everybody riveted to the TV event. I remember during the day of the funeral, we lived in a largely Catholic neighborhood and Kennedy was Catholic. So he was wildly loved in our neighborhood. And I remember going outside right after the funeral, and it was so quiet on a Monday afternoon. It was like otherworldly. But I also remember a couple of other things about that weekend. I remember I saw Lee Harvey Oswald on live television get shot, and he later died. But I remember that the day of I'm pretty sure this was on the day of the shooting. You know, you had the pictures of the casket leaving the hospital and going to the airport to Love Field and then flying on. But I remember the Dallas cops or FBI or whoever it was, they're holding up the gun, right? You remember that? Here is the gun that assassinated John F. Kennedy. I haven't seen any of that yet. It's been 8 days. I haven't seen anything about the caliber of the gun. I've heard, guesses as to what it was. I haven't seen anything about the bullets. Has there been an analysis on the bullets? There was a fireman that got shot and killed. Where is all that evidence? What is going on? I mean, this is a major, major event in the life of America. This was a former president and the leading candidate to be elected president a second time. This happens, and it's like there's a news blackout almost. And so in that vacuum, everybody starts guessing. Who's responsible? Who did it? And everybody's got theories. And did the Secret Service intentionally stand down, or were they just incredibly negligent? Well, we can establish they were incredibly negligent. And the question then is, how far was that intentional? Was that done as a directive? And this Secret Service director, she needs to go. After, they need to give her a subpoena and start asking her questions right now. Because you remember back on, let's see, January 6th, remember that date? There were bombs supposedly placed at the Democratic National Headquarters and the Republican National Headquarters. And the Republicans, when they took Congress, they tried to investigate that, but what did they find out? All of the Secret Service phones and text messages from that day had been wiped clean from the phones. Mike Benz at Mike Benz Cyber on Twitter has about a 10 or 20 minute interview that he did the other day with that, where he points all of that out. Well, Kamala Harris is a VP. She's under, or she's running for VP. No, she's been elected. Wait, yeah, she was elected VP. And she's under Secret Service protection, and this thing happens, and she's in the building, it now turns out. It's just insane, and it's either incompetence or what everybody says about the deep state is true. And I think that's sort of indicative of the way the world's going to be leading up to the return of the Lord. I think it's going to be very confusing. So there are a lot of theories now. So Chris Martenson at Peak Prosperity had a very good video up, and I have another video. I can't remember who did it. Let's see. Somebody sent me this. So Peak Prosperity, and I don't have a link to that. You can look it up on YouTube. And a guy named Jovan Pulitzer has a thing up. And both of them conclude there are two, maybe more shooters. And Martenson does a very good job of analyzing the sound patterns, and that the one gun sounded this way and another gun sounded another way. And Pulitzer debunks as kind of a crazy theory. Oh, well, it was somebody was on the water tower, because there looked like an image on the water tower. But when you analyze it, that person would have had to have been 10 feet tall and hanging on the side of the water tower and shooting, which just doesn't make any sense. And Pulitzer makes a good point, is stop being so stupid, all of you conspiracy theorists, at least be rational at some point. Then you saw the videos, and I won't play them because I think people who have put these videos in their videos are getting their videos pulled down by YouTube, that the alleged shooter, and I will use the term alleged shooter, this Crooks kid, about 20 years old, had been in a BlackRock commercial a couple of years ago for 8 or 9 seconds. And so everybody says, oh, BlackRock, that's run by a Jewish guy, Larry Fink, and they're trying to do 9/11 again by taking out Trump. I mean, I'm hearing this all over the place. And so the anti-Semitism part of this is ratcheted up. And I've seen those. I mean, you can find the videos on the internet, and these videos get to stay up. When you accuse Larry Fink, because he's Jewish, as being behind all of this. And I don't know, and my question would be, how is that connected? And we need to understand that, yeah, okay, it was a BlackRock video, true. If this kid was the shooter, he's properly identified, he was in the video, but there were a lot of other kids and teachers in the video. What about them? Are you investigating their connections and what they might be planning, or what BlackRock's doing with them, or that the BlackRock up the food chain even know about this kid? Did they get a release signed by him to be in the video? I don't know. Those are questions that I would ask if, this was a case that was presented to me. And so I think we need to be careful about that. Correlation is not causation. For example, let's say that you're an orthopedic doctor and it's fall sports season, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of students coming to you with shoulder injuries. Not uncommon in sports season. And the doctor notes that all of the kids who come in are wearing tennis shoes. Therefore, would he be reasonable in concluding that tennis shoes is very common among people with shoulder injuries, therefore tennis shoes are the cause of the shoulder injuries? And I really think that a lot of the analysis is at that level. Now, if he added additional facts there, it's basketball and volleyball season and they're coming in with sprained ankles and they're wearing tennis shoes, then maybe it has something to do with the sports that they're playing. And so now we're drilling down on what the causation is. And so correlation is not causation. So yeah, kid was in a BlackRock commercial, but does that mean anything? We don't know that yet. It's okay to point it out. Then there was this allegations that a company had shorted stock in Donald J. Trump and Rumble. And the allegation is, the company says it was a clerical error in their reporting of this, that they had 12 million shares shorted in Donald J. Trump. So if Trump gets killed, I've heard people say the stock in Donald J. Trump will go to zero immediately. I don't think that that's true. It will go down. There's no doubt about that. But it didn't go down. Actually, it went way up on Monday. And so these people, if these were what we call naked shorts, they didn't actually own the stock, but they were making a bet that they could acquire the stock and then sell it at the low price. If they didn't have the stock and the price went way down, they're going to lose millions and millions of dollars if they have 12 million shares, because they're betting that the price is going to go way down. And it's common in these hedge funds that they're always making these bets on things. So I don't know the answer on that, okay? I just think we need to look at, and by the way, I saw videos. Oh, that company's owned by a bunch of Jewish people. They have a BlackRock connection. I saw that. I mean, this is crazy what's going on with blaming the Jews in Israel for everything in the world. It's the world we live in, and it's getting worse. So Trump did get good news on Monday. They threw out the documents case down in Florida, Judge Cannon did, because said the special counsel had not been appointed properly. Now, that's been a view floating around the federal courts for a while. It's a minority view, but I actually think it's probably the correct view, and I think this Supreme Court will uphold it. So, by the way, now anybody who's involved in a case involving a special counsel is running in and saying my case should be dismissed or my conviction overturned. Well, who is one of those people who was just recently tried by someone who was appointed as a special prosecutor? Hunter Biden. He has filed a motion with the court saying, hey, they appointed this guy as special prosecutor. If Trump gets his case dismissed, I get my case dismissed. Now, there's a difference in that the special prosecutor in the Hunter Biden case came from within the Justice Department of Justice. He was a U.S. attorney. He had gone through the Senate confirmational approval process, unlike Jack Smith, who was prosecuting the documents case down in Florida. So there is a difference, but by the way, I don't know if it makes any difference anyway, because I think maybe Hunter Biden's going to get pardoned. Do you think that might happen? So it seems to be kind of a useless exercise at some point. And if there's all these things going on, so this is Biden's very, very upset. He's ill and isolated. Biden is stewing at all the calls to exit. And everybody says he's going to announce this weekend. And I haven't checked my phone for 20 minutes, so I don't know if he's resigned since I walked up here. And the Democrats are fighting. And look, this is a quote from yesterday's New York Times. Sick with COVID and banned by allies, President Biden has been fuming at his Delaware beach house, increasingly resentful about what he sees as an orchestrated campaign to drive him out of the race, and bitter towards some of those he including his one-time running mate, Barack Obama. Mr. Biden has been around politics long enough to assume that the leaks appearing, this is the New York Times, appearing in the media in recent days are being coordinated to raise the pressure on him to step aside. Yeah, like we all knew that was happening. Thank you, New York Times, for confirming it in a front page article. To raise the pressure on him to step aside, according to people close to him, he considers Representative Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, the main instigator, but is irritated at Mr. Obama as well, seeing him as what? A puppet master behind the scenes. That's the New York Times description of what's going on. And so that sort of gives life to that. Remember the Stephen Colbert interview with Obama? Hey, if I could figure out a way to put a guy up there with an earpiece and I could kind of just sit in my family room in my sweats and tell him what to say and do, I'd be on board with that. I'd be all for that. Ha, ha, ha. So that's seems to be what's going on. So look, the Republicans had the big convention, and this is an editorial this morning, an op-ed in the New York Times by someone. And of course, the New York Times is going to be against Trump. And so when somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to write this article, Trump has abandoned pro-life voters, the New York Times, they don't care about pro-life people, right? They haven't had a change in heart that unrestricted abortion on demand is an evil, demonic thing. This is just to get Trump. But you see what they're saying is that Trump has abandoned pro-life voters. And there's some truth to that. They did back off on abortion and some other issues in the platform. They had, I don't know if it was the first night, Harmeet Dillon, who I think is a Sikh, gave this. I've never heard a Sikh prayer before. I never want to hear one again. She got up and gave a Sikh prayer. And I don't know who's running this thing. If you're trying to get evangelicals, that doesn't seem to be the way to get to them, is to have a Sikh prayer at the closing or opening of a major session of the Republican National Convention. It just seems to be wrong on many levels. And she, by the way, she's a phenomenal attorney. And if you're in trouble, she might be one of the people you would want to call if the government's coming after you, because she is just top notch. But she's wrong on that particular issue. Now, I hesitate to play this clip because it will actually, I have a clip of a British lawyer to play later. And the title, the program channel, the channel title, the channel name on YouTube is called Triggernometry, which I think is like, I wish I was clever enough to come up with, maybe that's what I should have titled this one today, Triggernometry. So some people are going to be really upset with this video. Some people are going to be happy. And I'm going to be concerned for a whole different reason. And I've only seen one or two other people raise the issue. And everybody says, well, this is the greatest video I ever saw. This is the worst video I ever saw. It was the interview of Tucker Carlson of John Rich. Have you seen this? John Rich is a country music singer. He's got a new song out called Revelation. And I have a problem because he says, I like channeled it from God, is what he says. And I just have a problem with that orientation. And, he'll say, Trump, this was a miracle. He's protected by God. This means he's God's man. for the office, but we still got 4 months to go, or 3.5 months to go before the election. So we, and we don't know what the Democrats are going to do. I mean, they're going to get rid of Biden. They're going to put Kamala Harris in. By the way, there's a theory running around that what the Democrats could do is Biden would resign. By the way, if Biden says, I'm not competent to run for president, my view is, then why are you still president? If you can't run for the office, how can you run the office? It's like we're in this, and Democrats are fighting. The New York Times later in that article that I showed you earlier says Democrats are fighting like they've never fought ever. And that's saying something. I mean, I remember the 68 convention in Chicago. That was an open convention. They're talking about another one. And so are they going to do Kamala Harris? Now I hear Hillary Clinton's being floated. Of course, Michelle Obama, but Michelle Obama says, I don't want it. I don't know whether to believe her or not. I mean, she's got a pretty good life, got the houses in Hawaii and Martha's Vineyard. By the way, all the houses they bought, except for Washington, D.C., are in areas that are supposedly going to be washed over by rising oceans due to global warming, but they're buying these multi-million-dollar homes there. Seems to be a little bit inconsistent. I guess we can afford a home like this, we can afford a seawall. Yeah, but it kind of interferes with the view, don't you agree? So I don't know. I personally don't think Michelle Obama will run. And you'll notice I'm very careful not to use a gender identification pronoun with regard to Michelle Obama. I use Michelle Obama's name, not referencing her, because the whole thing is insane. I mean, I just feel like we're skirting around reality. So anyway, John Rich is interviewed by Tucker. And so I'm going to play it. And so John Rich comes out and they talk about the book of Revelation, and John Rich, he then quotes, 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people which are called by my name. And even the people who would normally criticize somebody for making that connection, like, if we did this in America, God would bless us and heal our land. A lot of people say, well, that verse only applies to Israel. But the people who would normally make that, they like everything else he said, so they just forget about the part that they usually criticize people for. It's very postmodern what's going on. We live in a deeply postmodern world. So he criticizes the preacher of rapture. And so people who aren't pre-trib love that he criticized it. But then he's got some other issues, but he appears to be a pre-wrath rapture guy, so people who are pre-wrath or post-trib like what he has to say. And I think he makes kind of a straw man argument about complacency, which I don't see in the many friends that I have who are pre-trib. I don't see that. I'm sure that that's true, but it's kind of an interesting thing where rapture timing now becomes like a bulletproof vest. Okay, if I'm pre-wrath and you're pre-trib, I've got a bulletproof vest against the Antichrist and you don't, because you're going to fall for him. I don't like that argument. I don't like the argument that pre-trib people are just sitting around waiting and doing nothing. And I've never seen that. I grew up in pre-trib churches. I've never seen that in my life. I've seen plenty of complacent Christians of all stripes and all different kinds of churches. So I think so I'm going to play it, but at the end of this is what I think is the money part of the conversation that causes me concern. And hopefully you'll be able to see this.
Can I back up 200 years with you real quick?
Do.
I know you love history.
Yes.
200 years ago, basically, in 1830, a very wealthy, very charismatic preacher named John Darby, D-A-R-B-Y, came with this doctrine that's now referred to as the secret rapture or the pre-tribulation rapture. And that message took off. Why wouldn't it? I mean, who doesn't want to hear that we'll all be out of here before anything bad happens? That's a great message. That'll pack the pews right there. I love it. And it allowed them to say, for all we know, the rapture could happen before this church service ends right now, so you better move. And I guess to that end, it had a great effect. A lot of people got saved over that. A few decades after that, a guy named C.I. Scofield. Have you ever heard of a Scofield Bible?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So C.I. Scofield was basically a student of John Darby, and he adopted that part of the doctrine, and he incorporated that into the Bible. It was the first Bible ever made that had study notes with it. We have all kinds of Bibles now that have, concordances and study notes and all kinds of stuff that go along, but this was the first one that was ever made. It became so popular. Every Christian was reading it. Every minister was reading it. And this continues today, to this exact second. My own dad, when he went in seminary and was, wanting to become a minister, they said, make sure you have a Scofield Bible now when you come to class. Have your Scofield Bible. Scofield Bible also adopted that entire John Darby philosophy of Christians will not be here when the bad stuff starts to happen. And most Christians still believe that. Matter of fact, a lot of my friends that are Christians are going to watch this interview are probably right now going, hang on a minute. Now hang on. So this is pushing back against a doctrine that's been in existence now for coming up on 200 years. The problem with that doctrine is there's several places in the Bible where it talks about what's going to happen prior to Jesus Christ coming back to the earth. When he does come back, that is when what we call the rapture happens. The word rapture is nowhere in the Bible. It talks about us being caught up with him and pulled out of here, and then the ultimate wrath is poured out on this planet. That's what we call the rapture. So that's not in debate. The question is, what happens leading up to that? It's a good question to ask, right? For some reason, nobody ever preaches that. They don't want to talk about what all happens prior to it. So if I can I just read if we have time?
Also.
That's why I love the thought of this interview.
I do too. But just to be clear,
Sunday.
What you're saying is the Scofield Bible, its theology is deceptive.
I'm saying that the same way the media takes a factual situation and twists it and gives you a version of it, which we all know we're force-fed every single day, the same exact tactic was used in 1830 by John Darby, and guess who he was connected to, by the way? The Rothschilds.
And I don't know that that's accurate either.
He was connected to the Rothschilds.
Read a lot about Darby.
He did the same exact tactic and twisted that. I don't know why he did that. It
maybe he means Scofield, but I'm not even sure about that.
There were churches popping up everywhere right after that. I'm saying that, including me, including my own father, for a long time, that's what we believe too. But when you start actually going back and reading line by line by line what is said that will be leading up to Jesus coming back, which is when the rapture happens, it's the inverse of what John Darby.
Now this is getting to the point where I think you're going to see.
I didn't know that.
What I think Tucker was trying to accomplish.
I'm not surprised even a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. I interrupted you. I just want to be totally clear about what you were saying. So you were saying you want.
Well, I'm curious how you take this. What I'm telling you right now, I don't know that.
Personally, I mean, I know nothing about any of this stuff, but I decided to read the Bible about a year and a half ago. I did, and it really just changed my life. I just thought it was just the most amazing thing I've ever read or done. But when I decided to do that, I'm so distrustful. I didn't grow up around preachers, but I have real distrust, and I think it's earned. And so I didn't want any commentary in the Bible that I bought on Amazon.com. I just want to know what it says.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I just want to know what it says. And so, yeah, to this day, including this morning, I mean, I just want to, because I'm coming from total ignorance. My father was not a preacher, not to put it mildly. So, yeah, I don't have the background at all. So I just want to know what it says. I don't want to be misled. I've lived a life, in the media, so I'm highly familiar with how populations are misled, lied to, deceived, and then hurt on the basis of those lies. I know a lot about that, and I didn't want that. That's why I don't have TV. That's why I don't like the internet. I don't want that stuff in my head, and so I have no commentary at all in the Bible that I'm reading. And but my sense was the Scofield stuff, which has had massive implications for our foreign policy, for example, and in our domestic politics, was probably a lie. It seems like a lie to me, but I don't really know because
I don't think all of it was a lie. I think this particular subject
that
was.
I do know that translation or that commentary on the Bible has had massive effects on our politics that have been very, very negative and resulted in the deaths of a lot of people. So I do know that for a fact, but I don't know much about the theology. So would you?
Okay, now, do you see where my concern comes in? Because what's Tucker saying there? Now, remember, this is Tucker who, like 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago, interviewed a rank anti-Semitic liberation theologian and never asked him a hard question because why? The guy was against Israel existence. Okay, so now Tucker seizes on this part, and this is what I think everybody's running around going, oh, this is great because it supports my view on the timing of the rapture, or this is awful because it doesn't support my view on the timing of the rapture. And I think this is the money part of the interview. Okay, I mean, we can argue about the rapture timing and all that other stuff. Okay, the best proof of when that is going to be is when it actually happens. And by the way, I think John Rich did make a good point about it does have a tendency to get people ready, but what people really need to be ready, they need to be ready to die at any moment. I mean, how many of you, I know if I asked this question, I would not see a single hand. How many of you know your exact exit date out of here? Or method? We don't. You always need to be ready to meet the Lord. You always need to be living your life the right way. So, but what Tucker does is, this is deceptive, and this theology has massive implications for our politics and our foreign policy. Do you see what he's saying there? Zionism is the problem. This is Tucker Carlson. So if he's reading the Bible, great. He also needs to talk to people who know a little bit about what it says and what it says about Bible prophecy. But it's clear where he's going from. And you see this in Candace Owens and the way she's approaching everything. I mean, she was making these lunatic comments about, Mengele, yeah, they said he did this on people, but why would you even do that? It's not even logical. It doesn't make any sense. So I don't think it's true. And she'll cite Nick Fuentes, and Candace, by the way, is converted to Catholicism, and there's a whole bunch of stuff we could say about her. Probably not the best place to do it. I just have issues with her, major time on this particular issue, and I have issues with Tucker Carlson on this. And my concern is that a lot of people miss this part of the interview. I think this is the money part of the interview. And Rich does a great job presenting the gospel and all that other stuff. So we can be glad about that. And then we can be, it's a full moon weekend, and I'm not sure I want to check the comments this week, because it does, it is a full moon, so I would just encourage everybody, make sure you're taking your medication and everything before you comment. So now we have this. So we have this computer outage, and the question is, and there's all sorts of theories about this. It was intentional and that type of thing. And I will be honest with you, at the Haller House, we're Mac people, although we use a Microsoft Office product. We didn't have any trouble that I know of. Everything seemed to be okay, but I wasn't flying. And I have friends. I have one friend whose son was in Boston. He's 12 or 13 years old, and they were freaking out. How do I get my kid home? and they live way south, and they drove to Boston and got them. That was a very smart, intelligent response, because I think people are still stranded all over the place. And they're saying the company that put out this software update was called CrowdStrike. Was CrowdStrike? Yeah. And the software update corrupted things, and people say, oh, well, it would never get through. They would never allow anything like this unless they tested it extensively. But we know that companies make mistakes all the time. That's why we have lawyers, praise the Lord, right? One of the reasons. So, and the interesting thing is, it was only the computers that were updated that had the problem. And so I don't know that it was like this massive World Economic Forum planned cyber attack or anything like that. I'm just not seeing that yet. I've read a guy on Twitter had like 20 pages of his theory that, yeah, this was planned, this was deliberate. It did stop some trading in stock, and immediately said, okay, see, that's related to the Trump thing because they're trying to stop the trading in Trump stock. And we don't know yet. But they did say that Macs that don't use a Windows operating system did okay. In fact, I don't know if it's a meme that went around, but one airline that didn't have trouble was Southwest. And Southwest has had plenty of problems, but the way they presented it was Southwest is using an ancient version of Windows that hasn't been updated forever, and so it was only people who are getting all the Microsoft updates on their Windows operating system it was sort of a combination of things. I mean, there were people who it was affecting healthcare, banks, but not everyone across the board. But a lot of hospitals canceled surgeries, necessary surgeries, and they're telling people, we don't even know when we're going to get back to you. People who need an operation. And it caused all sorts of chaos. And so they're saying the airlines won't pay up for flight chaos after IT failure. There's travel payments and health into chaos. And they're saying, and you're not even really hearing that much about, I haven't seen that much about it. It could last for weeks, the companies say. It could be weeks to months to get everything sorted out. And that's a good graphic from the Times of London. Everything's kind of tied in a knot. And, this is a big deal. But what we had access to everything, and we never lost anything. And I know when a charge card went through, we got a notice from the bank, hey, was this a charge for you guys, just like normal? Or was this fraud? So here's this is Visa, and you can see how the user problem reports skyrocketed. Financial Times, business across the world hit by the largest IT outage in history, and it was. I'm just saying, in my little world, it didn't seem to make that big a difference. Everywhere I went, everything worked. Except I played golf and my putter didn't work, but I don't think that had anything to do with software. So they were saying problems at Microsoft 365, but I used that and we didn't have any problems, but we have a Mac. In England, they gave a record jail term to the Just Stop Oil founder. They blocked a highway in England. They got 5 years in jail. Great decision, because they're causing chaos and so they got the gang, and some people are shocked that they would do that. And so one big donor to Just Stop Oil saying, hey, you need to free the Just Stop Oil 5, they're calling them now. There's also a report out of the UK, and then I need to move over to the Middle East if we're going to get out of here before noon. And I'm going to be on some programs this week, by the way. I'm doing Tom Hughes tomorrow. I think that'll be on at 5 p.m. Monday on Hope for Our Times. I'm doing a recording. I'm doing something with David Fiorazzo. I don't know when I'll play. I'm doing Stand for the Truth on Friday. I'm doing J.B. Hickson on Friday. So I'll have time to talk about the stuff I don't get to today, I'm sure. But this was a great article. This came out from the BBC, and this is from the Times of London. The claim has been we need to give these children puberty blockers. We need to do these irreversible surgeries to change their sex from one gender to the other, because if we don't, they'll commit suicide. Now, I'm trying to remember, I think his name is Larry McHugh. He was a head psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins University Medical Center, where they did the first sex change operation. And they had studied this. This was in the Wall Street Journal probably 10 years ago now. And they said they had studied this, and the people who actually had the sex reassignment surgeries were 19 times more likely to commit suicide. And they documented that in their research. That narrative changed. Why? Because there's a lot of money involved. When you change someone's gender, the drugs, the surgeries, the follow-ups, we're talking like a couple $1 million per patient in fees, in charges that they're going to pay over their lifetime. So they said, well, we got to come up with well, if we don't do this, they'll commit suicide. Now they're saying is, there's really no proof. It's been debunked by a UK study. And listen, this was one, I guess we had to wait for the study, even though common sense would tell us that the way it should have been. So common sense did not win out. This is a reports coming out of the UK about what happened back during the Charlie Vector 019er days. And they're coming out and saying, hey, poor planning and groupthink failed the public, and people died as a result. Like, we sort of knew all of that. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit jumbled because the whole Middle East thing is just like a swirling tornado. So I'm going to kind of reach into the middle of the tornado and pull out a little bit at a time. But I'm going to be jumping around. So here's a report. This is from Jerusalem Post. If Israel hits more civilians, we will aim at new targets. That's what Nasrallah said. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Hezbollah escalates its threats, its attacks and threats. And Nasrallah, what he said in his, he did a speech the other day in Beirut, and he said, listen, we're gonna expand the circle of what we're attacking. Because we're tired of the fact that we've only got 80,000 people in the north of Israel to evacuate their homes, and we're destroying all the villages and towns that they used to live in. We want to expand that area of attack. This was a speech he gave on July 17th, so that would have been Wednesday. And he said this, so here's just a highlight. This is a translation of the Arabic. For the first time, Israel appears unable to achieve its goals after 10 months of fighting and covers up its failure by committing heinous massacres against civilians in Gaza. The Yemeni front was able to prevent ships from crossing the Red Sea to occupied Palestine and oppose a siege on the port of Eilat. And it's accurate, by the way. And again, my slides are jumbled up despite my efforts to organize them. The port of Eilat in southern Israel on the Red Sea just laid off half of its workers because nothing's coming in. So what Hezbollah is doing with these drone and mortar and missile attacks and rocket attacks is it's shutting down parts of the Israeli economy. You have 80,000 people, 45 villages and towns emptied out in the north. What do you think that's doing to the economy? Shut down 10% of Columbus, Ohio. Do you think that would have a ripple effect through the economy of the whole state of Ohio and maybe the country? Yeah, and so Hezbollah is doing this, and they're getting a lot of bang for their buck. Continuing with Nasrallah's points, if the enemy tanks come to Lebanon and South Lebanon, They will not suffer from a shortage because there will be no tanks left for them. We will rebuild our homes and build our front villages more beautiful than they were. All our front villages are, because all of our front villages are a symbol of our steadfastness and resistance. Everything that is rumored about a ready agreement regarding the situation on the Lebanese front is not true. If it is true, and the future of the situation in the South will be decided in light of the results of the battle in which the resistance and support fronts will be victorious. In other words, if there's a settlement in Gaza, a ceasefire there might be a ceasefire up north. But then the question becomes, so what are you going to do? So you're living in a hotel in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or someplace, in the southern part of the Galilee, and they come in and they say, we've got a ceasefire with Lebanon, come back home. Why exactly would you do that? Israel has a massive, massive problem here. And it seems to be almost intractable. Our front in Lebanon will not stop as long as the aggression against Gaza and its people continues. And so and I would highly recommend you go to the Almanar website, ALMANAR. It ends with .lb. I think it's .co.lb for Lebanon. And you open it in Chrome, and you'll get an English you can select an English translation up in your address bar, and you can follow what this guy says, and you can follow all the news that Hezbollah sees fit to print. Jonathan Spire asked some great questions about why are the Houthis and Iraqi Shiite militias threatening Saudi Arabia? And that was in Friday's Jerusalem Post. You can go to the Jerusalem Post, jpost.com website and read that. Jonathan's an excellent analyst. In essence, he says, listen, this war that's going on, it's not the Houthis, it's not Hezbollah, it's not Hamas, it's not, these groups in the Negev and the West Bank, Judea, Samaria. It's Iran. It's all about Iran. Iran is the one that's behind all of this. And they're being very effective in pursuing this. So here's an article. Israelis are quietly preparing for war with Hezbollah. This is from the Wall Street Journal. And look at what some of this article says. We expect, so if war breaks out, this is a Haifa hospital director. We expect to have thousands of casualties over here. Healthcare centers, emergency services, and residents across Israel are preparing for a war that could far outstrip the damage of the conflict with Hamas. Hezbollah is better trained and more heavily armed with a missile stockpile. Experts estimate at 150,000 projectiles capable of pinning down the entire country. And I'm questioning that number. They've shot off about 8,000 since October 7th, but I don't think that means they're down to 142,000 because I think Iran continues to resupply them as quickly as they can and maybe build up that supply. And an Iranian general, colonel, whatever, said it's 1 million rockets, missiles, mortars. Now, that number's not been verified, but I mean, what happens? So if you want, get the Red Alert app. There's another app. It's called I'm trying to remember what the name of this thing was. Zofar or something like that. That's the one I use. And I mean, I get these warnings. I mean, every morning. Every afternoon, I'm waking up, or when I wake up or when I am running around, I get these red alerts of all these missile attacks and rocket attacks that are occurring along the northern border. Continuing with the Wall Street Journal article, Israel Health Ministry has asked Rambam to be prepared to surge its capacity by 40% if fighting escalates. Our reference scenario is a war at least 60 days with very powerful missiles landing around us every 4 minutes. It's a big problem. Now, in the show notes, by the way, the email I sent you guys back there, it has links to some YouTube videos and reports. If you want to read and you want to learn a lot about the situation, first of all, go to Alma Research, Israel-alma.org, ALMA, and you'll get weekly and bi-weekly updates about what's going on in the north. And then you should bookmark this website. It's called the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, named after Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat. And they have a tremendous wealth of papers that have been released over the last 2 weeks, including this one that's by a retired brigadier general named Erzan Ortel. And so here's one he wrote back on July 7th, just 2 weeks ago. It was released. And it's titled, How to Win the 30 Years War with Iran. I'm going to play a clip in just a moment. The head of the Harut Center, interview with Caroline Glick. It's about 10 minutes long. And the whole, you need to go, I think I have in the show notes. If not, I'll try to post the link today. Go to JNS TV. Look this up. It's about 2 weeks ago interview with the head of the Harut Center with Caroline Glick, talking about the war in the North. And he wrote an article at Tablet Magazine about in April 24th, so it's 3 months ago, The Last Lebanon War. This is a phenomenal article, Tablet Mag, and look up The Last Lebanon War and what's his name? Ahmad Cohen. Phenomenal article. Great research, great analysis, and everything. So back to the Begin Sadat Center article. Look at what this one says. This is what the recently retired brigadier general says. Israeli history must be retold in a sequence of 3 long historical wars. The Iron Swords War does not stand on its own. The campaign in Gaza is a critical transition stage, both conceptual and practical, during which Israel is moving from defense to offense in a long war with Iran's proxies. To realize its achievements, Israel needs a pause of a few years during which the strategy and military power for the offensive will be formulated. True learning is required at the political and military levels, and national reconciliation is required. Decisive emergency steps will have to be taken to build a military power that is more suitable to the broader war. And I think this is a very good assessment. In fact, General Amir Avivi from the Israeli Defense and Security Forum has been saying this for 3 years, ever since I've known him. And he just says, we need to prepare for a different war. We're not prepared for the right war. We didn't have the conceptual ability to realize what Hamas was going to do on October 7th. And I've suggested, I don't know if I'm phrasing the question the right way, is everybody wants to talk about the day after. What are we going to do when we defeat Hamas? But I'm saying in the West Bank, with the Houthis, with Hezbollah, with even elements in Jordan and Iraq, and all these countries are coming in, you're still technically in the day before scenario, the day before something really bad happens. So you should be talking about, you missed it in Gaza, but you're not done there yet. But rather than the day after in Gaza, you should be talking about the day before something bad happens. So go back to October 6th. Knowing what you know now about what Gaza did what the Hamas did in the Gaza border area on October 7th, what should you have done on October 6th? What would the consequences be? How would you handle it? Would you send troops in? Would you start bombing? Would you go to destroy tunnels? And my conclusion is the world's going to hate Israel regardless of what they do. That should be apparent. So go do the thing you need to do to protect yourself and your country. But the way Israel's structured, they're not structured the same as the United States. I don't think Netanyahu is commander-in-chief of the military. The military makes a lot of decisions on its own, and the reports are coming out that they really messed up. Now, political leadership, there haven't been reports on that yet, but it's clear that they messed up too. So then there's another article that he wrote, published a week ago, The Iron Swords War, the strategic balance so far, and what's next. And these reports are anywhere from about 8 to 30 pages. But if you want a really good assessment and a really good understanding of what all is going on in Israel with regard to Lebanon especially, go to the Begin Sadat Center website and get these articles. Links should be in the show notes below this video. And look at this one. 10 months after the surprise attack by Hamas on October 7th, it is possible to assess the strategic achievements of the antagonist. In addition to inflicting heavy casualties and many wounded on the Israelis, Hamas succeeded in undermining Israeli society and causing divisions within it on the issue of the hostages. Hamas has also succeeded in undermining Israel's international status. What this guy says is 100% correct. This is what's happening. And by the way, when we look at it from a Bible prophecy standpoint, we can cite all the verses in Zechariah and elsewhere that the entire world will be gathered together against Jerusalem. Now, we know that the ultimate fulfillment of that is a ways off, but there's a building up to that ultimate thing. And I think we're clearly in that stage. This is what's going on is really unlike anything that I said. Hamas also succeeded in undermining Israel's international status. Israel's economic situation has been severely damaged and continues to deteriorate. Hamas fought by the way, it's very hard for politicians in Israel, as it would be in the United States, to go in and say, we've got a big problem here. It's going to really cost you in your pocketbook. We need a bigger army. So taxes are going up. That's not going to be popular. Just like it wouldn't be here in the United States. Hamas brought the Palestinian issue back to center stage as a condition for a regional settlement and recruited the Iranian proxies, mainly Hezbollah and the Houthis, for a war of attrition against Israel. Perhaps its greatest achievement is the evacuation of populations of Jewish settlements within sovereign Israel for the first time since the establishment of the state. Israel is on the verge of crushing Hamas as an organized military force and removing one front from the ring of fire created by Iran around Israel. The Iranian attack on Israel proved the effective cooperation of a regional military coalition under the leadership of U.S. Central Command and proved that Israel has an effective defense system against ballistic missiles. Israel regained its trust in the major ground maneuver, and reserve soldiers were reestablished as the effective force in the IDF. Civil society reserve soldiers were civil society also demonstrated its ability to mobilize. Hamas was unable to mobilize the Israeli Arabs to join it, nor to mobilize the West Bank. I don't know that that's happening. They haven't gone into a big uprising yet, but everything I read says like the West Bank, that's Judea and Samaria, is on the verge of exploding, and not in a positive way for Israel. And by the way, there are no big security fences between a lot of the Israeli Arab population and Israel. So it's needs prayer. So here's one conclusion. The fact that the army was caught by complete surprise resulted in many casualties on October 7th. The hard fighting to occupy Gaza Strip and destroy Hamas caused fewer casualties than estimated, but still, the number of casualties Israel has suffered is high. Since October 7th, the IDF has lost the equivalent of an entire brigade in casualties and wounded, among them skilled special unit fighters and prominent field commanders. And then today, they just released this War in the North, Defense Budget and Strategy. An Israeli offensive in Lebanon has to be military decisive. So again, highly recommend you go get these articles. There's actually another one or two articles in the sequence. And so I'm going to now go to the head of the Harut Center, Ahmad Cohen, who was interviewed by Caroline Glick. I'm going to play about 5 minutes of this. It's from about 2 weeks ago, but he's a guy who wrote the paper titled The Last Lebanon War. We need to fight the last Lebanon War is what he's saying. And by the way, in these sequence of wars, some of these wars will be the last war fought. And some of them are talked about in the Bible. Now, I don't know, we're not at Ezekiel 38, 39 yet. I actually think you should probably go read Daniel chapter 7 about a war that might come before Ezekiel 38 and 39. It might actually come very soon. And I don't have time to go into that today. So here's Caroline and Ahmed Cohen from a couple weeks ago.
Not we call it ham, not hot.
Okay.
Not really bombing things.
Okay, so and that's more of a tactical thing. But you came away and you wrote an important article in April in Tablet magazine called "The Last Lebanon War." And so I want to talk a little bit about first where do you see things standing today vis-a-vis Israel and Lebanon?
First of all, it's as obvious to say that it's complicated, but I want to look from further distance about the strategies here. There's no border with Lebanon. This is Iran's infantry. This is Iran's ground troops.
It's Foreign Legion.
It's think about that as Iran, putting it as a foreign legion. It's like, no, this is Iran.
Okay.
Iran on our border.
Okay.
And we're fighting against Iran. And what is Iran's strategy?
Let me just take a step back for a second just to clue everybody, like you know and I know. So first of all, Hezbollah, everybody should realize, is seen by the Iranians and by Hezbollah as a unit inside of the Iranian Republican Guards unit, corps. So the IRGC sees Hezbollah as an integral unit inside of the IRGC, and it effectively has swallowed Lebanon, really since 2007-8 when it took over the airport and it staged a coup. So it's been in charge of Lebanon since then for 15 years or so, and yet we look at it as different. So we're starting this conversation from understanding that effectively through Hezbollah, which is Iran, Iran controls all of Lebanon, including the border with Israel.
Exactly. There's no Lebanese state. It's a failed state. There's no active government. Hezbollah is part of the non-active government, actually creates that to become non-active. We need to be clear in our point of view. We're fighting a war against Iran up in the northern border.
Okay.
Now we need to think about Iran's strategy. The lesson of the Arab countries from the 73 war, you can't win Israel in a direct approach war. That means a full-scale war with Israel, you cannot win. We will have the American support. We have the comparative advantage in a full-scale war. We have the Air Force. We have America's support with their aircraft carriers. These kind of wars, they should not attack Israel with them, because we will win them. That's why they went to a terror. And the second part is the war of attrition. The war of attrition, we're not good at these kinds of wars. We don't have, that's why he called us, Nasrallah called us spider webs. We're weak when we meet long-term pressure. Basically, that's their assumption. So in the Middle East, you always try an indirect approach. Lidl Hart, the British thinker, always use an indirect approach. They're trying to weaken us economically. We're trying to talk about ourselves as the democracy in the Middle East with a strong economy, but people with a security tension and threat, that hurts economics. You can't trust a place that is always threatened. And that's how they're trying to hurt us, aside of always using military power. So a direct approach will be a disaster, as it was now for Hamas. They tried to have a small attack and withdraw. They did not think we will take over Gaza in this way. So it's very good that we did that, and we need to finish that and destroy Gaza, not only Hamas, destroy every infrastructure we have there, put that aside. Lebanon are not trying to get a full-scale war. Iran with a nuclear weapon, they don't want to throw the weapon on us. They want to weaken us through a long-term negotiation and deterrence that we will be always terrified, investing a lot in national security and always deterring the West for them to use the nuclear weapon. That's why, by the way, Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon yet. Because in negotiating the nuclear weapon, they will be stronger deterring the West than having it. Look at North Korea, Pakistan. They have no leverage on the West. Iran has leverage because they're always playing the game. We are almost getting a nuclear weapon, pay us more.
No, I mean, I kind of think that North Korea has the leverage, Pakistan has the leverage of everybody knowing that they're nuclear armed states with ICBMs that are capable of attacking it.
But they have today sanctions on both of them, and that's it. They're not a topic in the world. Iran is using their leverage today. In one point, they will get the bomb, and then they will use the leverage in other ways. But they're always trying to leverage and negotiate. We understand it's a different way of thinking than the Western, very efficient utilitarian negotiating and end the deal somewhere.
Right. I want to get back to arguing with this on this point, but I don't want to belabor it right now because I want to get to the crux of your argument in the tablet piece. But before I do that, I need to ask you about what IDF is doing now. I mean, the IDF has been bombing different targets in Lebanon, killing various important Hezbollah terror commanders in Lebanon, really since they started their projectile offensive on us. And the question is then, how do you assess the IDF's operations to date? Do you think that they're just sort of whacking a mole and not have no strategic implications, or do you think that there's a rationale behind this that is getting us to a better place? How do you view these things?
The IDF, it took a time to articulate it and to go directly in that approach, but the IDF today is crushing every military infrastructure in southern Lebanon. Hurting one by one, they built a lot of infrastructure, mostly underground, in houses. Think about the entire southern Lebanon is Shiite town. They have Sunni Shiites, but the Shiite villages are all Hezbollah army bases.
Right.
That's basically how we need to think about it. And they are prepared for a ground invasion, Israeli ground invasion to southern Lebanon. What we're doing in the past 8 months, while they're shooting rockets at us and we withdraw from the northern border of Israel, we're crashing as much as possible, mostly with airstrikes. First of all, the people who are running the operation in southern Lebanon, and the second part of it is all the infrastructure. If you look deeply in where Israel is attacking, Israel is not attacking infrastructure northern of the Litani River. We're barely attacking. We're attacking sometimes strategic assets in the Bekaa in Lebanon. We're attacking anti-air facilities that they have in north of the Litani River, or individuals, leaders, commanders of Hezbollah north of Lebanon.
So what kind of infrastructures are you talking about?
South of Lebanon?
In southern Lebanon.
In southern Lebanon. It's warehouses for ammunition for the ground troops in an event that we come to attack. It's underground facilities that they have ready for us to ambush us. They're ready.
And we're bombing them?
Yes, I hope successfully. To my knowledge, doing a pretty good job. But we're preparing for that. That's my analysis. Looking at South Lebanon.
So anyway, go look at the whole thing. By the way, some people were texting me saying that the stream got stopped. I hear it's back up now. Part of that is because, and I'll remind our people in the tech room, before you repost the YouTube video, you need to edit out the Wall Street Journal video clip that I played when I was talking about Trump. I think that's the one that got us violated. I think. I mean, it might have been the video. I can't imagine it was the video that the headshot, the bullet and everything. But I think it was the Wall Street thing on the Secret Service that got us taken down for a while. There are certain organizations that are more protective of their video, even though YouTube sort of has a policy that if you put up something that's copyrighted by somebody else, will attach an ad to your video, whether you like it or not, and they'll get all the revenue from it. And that's fine. I don't care. But the worst one is Oprah. Fortunately, she's not around much anymore, at least not publicly. Wall Street Journal and CBS News. Those are the ones that I have the most trouble with using any of their video clips, even a short video clip. So apologize that happened. I need to remember about not using Wall Street Journal. So here, this is sort of the crazy thing that's going on. I'm going to try to do this in about 10 more minutes because I've got hours and hours of stuff that we could go. So this is Ben Gvir on the Temple Mount the other day. And of course, the Arab press was, look at Ben Gvir storming Al-Aqsa. That looks pretty scary. I mean, he's got a police escort to keep him walking in a certain area. But this is the whole thing with Hezbollah. Every fighter that's killed, as I've told you over and over, has a page, a memorial page at Al-Manar. Every one of them says, every single one of them, about 400 now, on the road to Jerusalem, he was martyred. This is about Israel. This is about Jerusalem. And so Smotrich is the finance minister, and he's proposing, he's sort of got charge of settlements, development of more additional settlements in the area of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. And our government hates him, and they're talking about sanctioning him, Smotrich and Ben Gvir. This would be unprecedented. Israel came out in the Knesset this week and adopted a resolution, the Knesset, by a vote of 68 to 9. So a lot of people didn't vote. There's 120 members in the Knesset, so they found it was going to be on a very sensitive topic, so they did the politician thing, and they left town and didn't vote. But people did show up, and even Gallant party supported this. Israel said, we will not agree to a two-state solution. This was a very big deal. This happened on Tuesday, I believe, a Wednesday. And it comes just before Netanyahu is supposed to be coming to the United States. And the question is he going to be meeting with Biden because Biden's got COVID and that type of thing. But remember also, Hezbollah said, we're going to increase the area of attack. Hezbollah's Nasrallah said that, but as Caroline and Mr. Cohen were talking, Carolyn and Mr. Cohen were talking, it's Iran. When Nasrallah speaks, it's like the Ayatollah Khomeini is speaking. He doesn't do anything that's not approved by Iran. And so he said, we're going to increase the area of attacks. And then this happened. This is a Ring doorbell the other night in Tel Aviv. And what happened? A drone came in. Here's a view from a long view. People out on the water saw this. And a guy was killed in downtown Tel Aviv. The big white building there, you see, that's what used to be the United States Embassy. And of course, the Tehran Times talked about, the Houthis sent this missile in, and they did it. It flew 1,600 or 1,700 miles, came in across Egypt, came across the Mediterranean, came in. And apparently they had it on radar, but somebody messed up and they didn't shoot it down, and somebody ended up dead. And then they've shot another one into Tel Aviv since then. And I believe the Israeli military announced they shot the IDF or IAF shot down like 5 other drones that were coming in from all the way down in Yemen. So the response has been fairly massive. Let's see, Israel's response. Here's that article I mentioned. A lot supports suspended operations. This is Arab News. Israeli warplanes pound Houthi-held Yemeni port. And you can see Israel went in and bombed it, fuel facilities and everything, and they're making a message to the Houthis. Of course, the Houthis are saying, that's okay, we have drones that can get around your system all the time. Here's what Netanyahu had to say in response.
From the beginning of the war, I made it clear that Israel will act against all those who attack us. This is why earlier today, I asked the Israeli cabinet to back my decision to strike against the Houthi targets in Yemen. The port that was targeted is not an innocent port. It's used as the entry point for weapons that are supplied by Iran to its Houthi terrorist proxies. The Houthis have used those weapons to attack Israel, to attack Arab states in the region, to attack many others.
So, I mean, so look, you can see Yemen all the way down here by Somalia, the Horn of Africa. That's a long distance that it flew, and it hit a building in downtown Tel Aviv. So the International Court of Justice came out with a ruling this week that said Israel is improperly occupying the settlements in West Bank, East Jerusalem are illegal. International Court of Justice rules. And I could go into some additional detail about whether they actually said occupation is illegal. I think the effect of it is just that. They're going to go to the UN, they're going to go to the International Criminal Court, they're going to try to get arrest warrants to get Gallant and Netanyahu and maybe other Israeli leadership. This is unprecedented. I mean, this is really like, you know, if you think of a mountain peak of anti-Israel, they're nearing the top in the world right now. So this is the International Criminal Court. You can get the opinion. It's long. The whole video is up of them railing against Israel. Blinken was at the Aspen Security Forum, and he said this about Iran.
Where we are now is not in a good place. Iran, because the nuclear agreement was thrown out, instead of being at least a year away from having the breakout capacity of producing fissile material for a nuclear weapon, is now probably 1 or 2 weeks away from doing that. They haven't produced a weapon itself, but that's something, of course, that we track very, very carefully. And you put those two things together, the fissile material, an explosive device, and you have a nuclear weapon. So we're focused on that. What we've seen in the last weeks.
Jake Sullivan said, he was interviewed this week, and he said the focus of the Netanyahu-Biden meeting coming up this week will be the hostage deal. The whole thing is just, it's crazy. Russia is now coming in and saying they're going to arm the Houthis with anti-ship missiles. Russia's really mad at everybody, and that's not a good thing. As this article notes in the Jerusalem Post, arms race gathers pace as Russia and U.S. plan to redeploy. And with regard to the International Court of Justice ruling, I'll finish with, but you don't want to see an Obama clip, so I'll do a mercy call on that one. This is Natasha Halsdorf, who is with the UK Lawyers for Israel Charitable Trust. She's an attorney in London, excellent defender of Israel. She did a debate recently. I'll play a clip of it here as we finish, with Douglas Murray about Zionism, anti-Zionism, and she's just superb. I mean, I do have a much longer clip I want to play, but it's just we don't have time today. Anti-Israel lawfare has reached a dangerous new low. That's her op-ed in today's, I think it's in the Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph in the UK today. She's incredibly articulate. Now, what she said was this is this decision by the International Court of Justice is weak reasoning. It's a staggering misuse of the tools of justice and tears up the framework of the Oslo Accords. Remember the Oslo Accords? That accord, that deal, internationally recognized, gave parts of this to Israel to manage, to control, to govern. And the International Court of Justice, they're just like, we don't care. Why? Because we're against Israel, and we're going to show how much we are against Israel. So here's there's a debate in Canada with Natasha Halsdorf and Douglas Murray on the issue of Zionism. This is her closing argument. Is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? And here's what Natasha had to say. This is called the Munk, M-U-N-K debates. Munk has them up, but you have to pay like a $25 donation to get the whole debate. Here we go.
I sit in front of you as the granddaughter of Palestinians. Living under the British, they had identity cards issued to them that identified them as Palestinians, nationals of the British Mandate. Think on that the next time you hear people trying to revise history and tell you what Palestinians are today and suggest that that is equivalent to what existed before the State of Israel was formed. We have heard hostility to the State of Israel from the moment that Gideon got up. The suggestion that a gathering like this would be out of place in the Jewish state is preposterous. I've attended many myself. And you have the most rigorous, robust debate imaginable in Israel. More so, I would suggest, than anywhere in the world. But if the opposition really cared about Palestinians in the way that they profess, they would be calling, as I do, for Egypt to comply with its international law obligations, those that it signed up to in the African Union Convention on Refugees, which it acceded to in 1980, Egypt's responsibility to allow safe passage for refugees fleeing civil disorder in Gaza. Israel has gone above and beyond, and other modern militaries frequently say we wouldn't be able to meet the standards that Israel sets in the precautions that it takes. But it has had to move those civilians, or encourage them to move, it doesn't control them, to evacuate, to provide humanitarian corridors. When you think of the ease with which those civilians could be properly provided for the other side of the border with Egypt in Egyptian Rafah, where the aid that Israel is facilitating into the Gaza Strip wouldn't be diverted and stolen by Hamas, where aid workers would be able to assist them without being targeted by Hamas. I haven't heard any of that from the opposition today, and that is another reason that I say to you, what they are putting forward, the blood libels that they are peddling in, is anti-Zionism. And we also saw it in that comment from Gideon, give it back, referring to the West Bank. It's the settlers, the settlers. That call for the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, to be Jew-free, as so much of the rest of the Arab world, Judenrein. We've heard that before, ladies and gentlemen. We were told because Jews in the 20th century differed about whether the creation of the State of Israel was a good idea, that was a reason that Jews couldn't be anti-Semitic if they were anti-Zionist. Well, I urge you to consider a debate between parents, which might be entirely legitimate as to whether or not to have a child. There may be arguments for and against, reasonable ones. But once that child is born, to suggest that it should be gotten rid of would be murder. That is what we have heard advocated by the opposition today. And so I ask you, if you are, as Israel, liberal, care about peace, and abhor racism, you will stand with the proposition this evening.
So that is Natasha Hausdorff of UK Lawyers for Israel, Charitable Trust, and one who I think gives lawyers a good name. She's excellent, excellent, excellent. So look, Israel's in a very difficult spot. The admonition in Scripture to pray for the peace of Jerusalem is more applicable than ever. This is all about Jerusalem. This is all about the Temple Mount. That's where all of this is headed. It's on a march to that. I don't think it gets rolled back. Sort of talking with some friends this week, like, boy, it would be nice to go back to, 2 weeks ago. Everything seemed not too bad 2 weeks ago. But this is the world we live in. This is the world that the Lord has placed us in, to be a witness to people and to help people in this time and share the gospel with us. So let's pray. And again, I apologize for the video getting knocked down earlier. If you want to go over our Rumble channel, Real FBC, you should be able to find the whole video there. YouTube is, again, I think it was the Wall Street Journal video that I used, not anything else. So let's pray, and we'll be back again. I'll be on Tom Hughes tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern. Stand for the Truth, 10 o'clock Eastern Friday morning. Q90fm.com is that website. And then JB Hickson, Not by Works podcast next Friday. I don't know if that's live or not, but I think it might be. And I was on Kurt Reed the other day if you want to check his YouTube channel as well. So anyway, let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for the day. Thank you for giving us all of this information in advance so that we can make sense of the world that we live in. Lord, I pray that you will help us to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves, as we navigate through the flow of information in these last days. That we'll be reasonable, well-informed people, but always standing for the truth, and always standing for the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Give us opportunities to share that, and we pray that you will bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.